मैं हूँ आपकी सहेली, आपकी दोस्त हिना जुनेजो और आज हमारे साथ गेस्ट स्पीकर मौजूद हैं हलीमा स्पीक्स। हलीमा की नाज़रीन एक बहुत ही दिलचस्प कहानी है जो कि मैं चाहूंगी कि आप उन्हीं की ज़बानी सुने। तो चलिए नाज़रीन, इंशाल्लाह लेट्स वेलकम ऑन बोर्ड सिस्टर हलीमा स्पीक्स। अस्सलाम वालेकुम सिस्टर हलीमा, हाउ आर यू?
Walaikum assalam. I'm amazing, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. I am so excited to have you on board today, Halima. And more excited than that, I'm looking forward to, you being able to share your story with us. So without any further ado, just carry on, sis. Let us know, talk us through your journey about your life, starting from your school, your home life, social life, and also if you can cover the motivation behind your self-help plan, inshallah.
No problem, no problem. Firstly, thank you for having me on here. It's a great, great platform, and I appreciate the work that you're doing as well. So thank you very much. In regard to my story, it's a bit of a movie, actually. I come from a Pakistani Muslim background. I had a bit of I'd say a bit of a dramatic childhood in regards to I started to experience mental health issues very early on. My parents divorced. They divorced when I was quite young, and obviously, as we know, that when situations like that occur, it tends to be the children that see a lot of things and it impacts them. So I had my own internal battles, whereas that was concerned. I suffered from a lot of self-esteem issues growing up. Sometimes they say it's just kids being kids, but sometimes kids can be cruel to each other without realizing the impact that it can make. And often I was, laughed at for the way that I looked, and it impacted me greatly for a long time during my life. So, growing up into my teens, I had I'd experienced a few different forms of abuse, mainly in environments that weren't supposed to provide me with that. When I went on Umrah when I was 14, I was actually molested by a shopkeeper in Medina when me and my family went on shopping, and I just wandered off onto the side. And it was something that I really held close to me and didn't tell anyone for a very long time because, it's supposed to be a holy place and I should have felt safe. And I was also a very naive child, and I didn't understand like the extremity of what it was that had happened to me. So it wasn't until over a year later, when it started to affect my schoolwork and my behavior, that I ended up telling my family about it. And I've experienced various different traumas in my life after that period. Things involving abuse, involving homelessness, involving my mental health. And I got married. I got married to a man that I thought, we were going to be very happy together, but he ended up being very abusive towards me. And again, that took a huge toll on my mental health as well. And it wasn't up until I'd left the marriage and I tried to get my life back in order that I just realized one day that I was so tired of life. I was very tired of one bad thing happening after the other. And as a community, uh, in regards to like the Asian community, we have this thing where we think that if you focus on something else or you keep yourself busy, then that's it. The problem's gone out of sight, out of mind, and that's just totally due to lack of education. So I thought, and my family thought, if you keep busy, get a new job, those are the things that will help you put your life together, and you're going to be fine. And obviously, little to our knowledge, there were so many deep rooted traumas and so many issues that I had developed as a result of all the things that had happened to me that I hadn't dealt with. And that led me to waking up one morning and trying to take my own life. And I know that that's a big stigma and it's a very taboo subject, especially when it comes to Islam and the Muslim community, because in Islam, you're not supposed to try to take your own life. So it's something that people look at in a very, very narrow way because of that reason. And when I went into that state, I ended up in hospital. I was sectioned and I was in a mental health unit for a week. And I think it was that made the people around me realize the severity of these issues. And alhamdulillah, coming forward to now, myself and like especially my family are very, very educated, a lot more than they were before when it comes to these issues, because sadly it had to get to the point that it did. And the work that I do now is heavily influenced by the things that I went through in my life, because when I came out of hospital, I wasn't satisfied with the care that I was receiving. So I took it upon myself to structure my own recovery. I went away, I left my family home, and I just isolated myself for a long time, just focusing on my mind, my thoughts, my past, and understanding why I behave the way that I do and why I think the way I think and where these issues have stemmed from. And it was that whole process that enabled me to heal the traumas that I had in a natural way, in a holistic way, without the need for medication and things like that. And alhamdulillah, I started to share my story. I started to share my breakthroughs online, and people started to respond really well to it. I was getting messages from people saying that I was helping them or I was inspiring them in some way. And that's when I realized that I have something here in front of me, and I have the ability to help so many people based on the work that I've done on myself, based on my knowledge, based on my experiences. And ever since then, I have been working very hard to support people with their mental health issues. And now this year, I've started to take more of a business approach to it, in regards to actually coaching people and actually creating products and services that will help people to maintain their positive mental health, inshallah.
Inshallah, Aziz. Wow, you just left me completely, awestruck, highly inspired, and hats off to you, Halima. I mean, it's a shame that, the intention with which you've gone to such a, holy place, and not everybody is the same. It's a shame that, there's one odd person out there in the wide, wide world who, again, tend to be narcissistic or abusive or whatever. But I'm thinking that the experience that you went through obviously didn't leave you in a good stead. And also in the sense of the abuser as well, the fact that he went down this route, not, having the fear of Allah watching him. Perhaps he may himself have, might have gone through some trauma in his childhood years. Perhaps because most of the time it seems like it's a vicious cycle that keeps getting
Yeah,
repeated, and
yeah.
perhaps that's one way of people trying to take their revenge by hurting somebody else in retrospect. What do you have to
Mhm.
say about that, Fatima?
I agree with you there, and that was probably one of the biggest realizations that I had when I was going through my recovery, because I used to live in this state of blame, where I used to blame everybody else for the way that I felt, because this person did this to me and this person did that to me. But what I started to realize from a psychological perspective is that quite often the abuser was once the person that was abused, and psychologically that's how it works. These wounds are created, and if they're not dealt with properly and they're not healed and the person doesn't seek the help that they require, so often it ends up turning into this trauma that influences them to actually then doing the same thing. And
Yeah,
it's so easy for us to be angry with these people because, yes, what they're doing is wrong. But if we look at it from that perspective, it enables you to show a sense of compassion, but it also enables you to heal yourself, because you know that if you don't heal yourself, God forbid, something like that could end up becoming your reality. And I would, I wouldn't ever dream of being that kind of person. So for me to heal myself and do that work was so important. But I also had to be able to have the strength to forgive him in order to move on, because I never saw him again after that. We came back to England and carried on with life. So I never saw him again. I never had to face him ever again. I don't even remember what he looks like, but I had to mentally forgive him for what he did to me, even though it caused me so much pain for such a long time, because I don't know what happened in his life leading up till then. And I had to do it for not just for his sake, but I had to do it for my own, because if I held on to that anger for the rest of my life, where would I be now? I'd still be living in that place of resentment and anger and frustration, um, and victimization, and I wouldn't be happy the way that I am now in my life. I'd still be in that dark place. So I feel like forgiveness is more important for yourself, not even for the person that you need to forgive.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. I think that's the best, part of the healing process, to forgive the other person and forgive yourself, rather than, beating yourself up too much for what had happened. Because
Mhm.
really, that was you've been living on the effect side of things. You weren't the cause to what happened to you, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And perhaps, I mean, the journey must have been quite long, Halima, from the point when you were a child going to school, to the point when you came, you reached a stage in your life when you got married to this person. So we'll talk about that later, but I would like you to cover up a few, just rewind and go back into your memory lane, if that's okay and easy for you, just for our viewers' clarity, that, when children are witnessing toxic relationships, specifically if it's got to do with your parents, who you have to see and face day in, day out. And it's such an emotional relationship of child and parent with each other. When you see your parents, specifically your mums or your dads, whoever you're attached more to, in an abusive and toxic relationship, the impact that has on a child, so the impact that it had on you, and then because of that impact, when you used to go to school, what was your school life like? What was your self-esteem like? What was your self-confidence like? Did your grades suffer? Did you suffer being able to make friends? What was your anger management like? If you could highlight all these issues.
Well, I would say that from my own experience and also from what I know as well from other people's experiences, the children, yes, they always suffer in the process of, the parents having a bad marriage or going through a divorce. But they all suffer very differently. For me, I struggled the most with my emotional management. So when I was at home and I was around my family, I was very quiet. I was very like, it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with me at face value. But then if I was in school or out in another setting or environment, I became a very angry child. So I used to get into a lot of fights with different children, and like if a kid said something to me, it would trigger me very, very quickly. There was no patience. I couldn't manage my emotions healthily. And I got myself into, a few not so great situations. And I've met a lot of people over the years that have also been, involved in family environments where, they came from bad backgrounds, or their parents had a rough marriage, and they witnessed things that they shouldn't have witnessed. And some people, it's affected their development when it comes to their grades and their education. Some of them, again, like you said, with self-esteem issues, they felt like there was something wrong with them, and maybe that's why their parents' marriages didn't work, because they took the blame on themselves. So there's so many things that can go wrong in a child's mind, in a child's life, as a result of this. And that's why I think it's very, very important that as a parent, if you are going through something like this, you need to pay attention to your children, and you need to understand the severity and the importance of mental health. Because mental health issues, yes, they get detected most of the time in your adult years, but they develop from things most often, and they develop from things that happened during your childhood. So pay attention to your children, communicate with them, ask them how they're feeling. Their feelings, their emotions, their mental health is just as important as yours as an adult. Like, they're also allowed to experience hardship. They're also allowed to experience challenging moments and confusion, and it's harder for them because, again, at such a young age, their minds are more fragile and they don't know how to manage their emotions the way that we do as adults. So please pay attention and remove this stigma of that therapy is something that should be looked down on. If your child is struggling, get them a therapist. Talking is such a healthy way. It's such a healthy outlet, and it's a way that you can prevent your child from suffering a great deal in the future. So please note the importance on that, because it's so, so important. Look after yourself, but look out for your kids as well, because again, I've seen it, I've experienced it. So often the parent thinks that the children are okay because they look okay, but you don't know what's going on when that kid's upstairs in their room before they go to sleep. You don't know what's going on when they're going to school. They don't come home and tell you everything. So you have to create that good relationship with your child where there's solid communication and your kid knows that they can come to you no matter what happens, and you're not going to get angry, you're not going to get annoyed, that you'll just listen to them with an open mind. You're never going to judge them, and no matter what they tell you, you will be there for them and give them the support that they require from you, not what you think that they need.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that with you, Halima. So then, Halima, as you grew older, at what age you felt that, you had that need of companionship and that you were ready to go for a relationship and you ended up getting married? How old must you have been then?
I had a lot of trauma, whereas it came to like the absence of my father, and this is something that, again, it needs to be spoken about more. There's this thing that we call daddy issues, right? And it's basically when a daughter mainly has either a negative relationship with their father, or their father is just not present in their life. As a father, you are basically, you set the bar for how your daughter will view men, because you are the first person, you're the first man that your daughter is ever going to love. So the way that you treat her sets an example of what she should accept, what she should tolerate, and the standard that is now set for her. So with me, because my standard was set so low, and I hadn't seen a good example of what a husband should have been like, when I came to then meeting the man that I wanted to get married to, I thought that what I had witnessed was acceptable, which was abuse, which was toxicity, which was narcissism. And I allowed that to happen to me. And I thought that it was okay. Like, I thought that that was all I was worth because of the wounds that had been created my whole life from not having that figure in my life that was teaching me, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how a man is supposed to treat you. These are the things you're not supposed to tolerate. These are the things you should walk away from. These are the signs that you need to look out for. I didn't know any of this. And I had such little self-worth that when these things did start to happen, my viewpoint was, no, this is a marriage. So I need to work at it. I need to help him. I need to figure out a solution. And no matter how bad it got, no matter how many phone calls to the police that I made, I always went back because I had that view in my mind that this was what I deserved, because I had such little self-worth. I didn't even tell my family for a long time. My family weren't even aware that this was going on. If they had known, they would have taken me out of that situation straight away, but they didn't even know because I was holding it so close to me. Because again, I was afraid of, them looking at him in a certain way, and I didn't want them to hate my husband. And, because again, all of these stigmas and these cultural viewpoints that we have, and how divorce is looked down upon, how divorcee women mainly are looked down upon and criticized and told that they couldn't keep a husband, or they can't do this, or if they have children that they're going to fail as a single mother, and all of these things that I've seen and witnessed in my life were running through my mind. And I just thought to myself, like, no, I have to figure out a way. And one day, eventually, I finally did tell my family, and they did encourage me to come out of that situation. And it took me a while to finally get the strength to actually say I'm done without running back 5 minutes later. And when I did do that, it took me a very long time to recover from it. It's one thing being out of a scenario, but then you have to deal with all the trauma that comes with it. And it took me a very long time to overcome a lot of the issues that I developed as a result of it. And it even took me a long time to even understand some of the issues that I developed. Sometimes it would be 6 months later, and then I realized that I had another issue that I hadn't detected before. So it's very complex. And again, it links directly with your mental health. My mental health probably suffered the most during this period of my life. And even while I was married, I tried to take my life twice, because I was just tired of the pain, you know. And these again are things that really, really need to be looked at, and a lot of Muslim women as well, because of the stigmas that we have and because of the cultural opinions that we have, a lot of women that are experiencing toxic marriages and abusive marriages are too afraid to walk out because of the fear of what are other people going to say. They let their own health suffer, their own well-being suffer, just because they're scared of the opinions of other people. But that shouldn't matter. The opinions of other people are so irrelevant when it comes to doing what's best for you. These people aren't looking after
Absolutely.
you. You
Yeah,
have to look
yeah.
after yourself.
Absolutely, because you see, when you teach a woman, you teach a whole generation. So the analogy fits in here that when you look after a woman, you're basically looking after the whole household or the whole generation, if you like, because she's the one to keep the whole entire family unit together. So if she's
Yeah.
going through a turbulent downtime or, phase in her life, then she needs to be supported rather than being expected to stay in that abusive relationship just because of name shame. When you fall
Okay.
down, nobody falls down with you. It's only when you're soaring high that you will see people following you and, harping your tune, really. So, at that stage, I can't imagine, wow, it's huge. Being a divorcee is a huge taboo in itself. To deal with that is even bigger. And then also having been inflicted with the mental health issues, so in our culture, clearly, if somebody knows specifically if a woman, is going through some kind of a mental health issue, they immediately, without flinching an eyelid, they'd say that, oh, you know what? Well, I think she's pagal in our community. Don't go and approach her in marriage because ये तो लड़की पागल है. या फिर
Mm-hmm.
if worse than that, पागल की चीज से satisfy उनकी ego नहीं होती है, तो उसके बाद they'd say कि उसको तो जिन है. So
Yeah.
these are the two typical mindsets that we come across, if a
Mm-hmm.
woman is basically inflicted by mental health issues. So what was it like? Because you were attached to two big stigmas, typically dominant in our community. One of being a divorcee, two of being a somebody who has mental health issues. How did you deal with the society then? Obviously, I understand you had to deal with your internal issues as well. In the same breath, there were
Mm-hmm.
external issues out there. You can't stop living just because a relationship is ended. So how did
Yeah.
you deal with all of this, Halima? Your plate must have been more than full.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that side where obviously
Whew.
from the culture that I'm from, and because of the lack of actual education when it comes to things like mental health, the first thing that people do think that are the demons, or maybe somebody's done black magic on you, and the first instinct is to call an imam and go and see an imam and see what he says about it. And it's such a toxic way of thinking, because mental health illnesses are an actual illness. If I broke my arm and I've got a cast around it, you're not going to say that somebody's done black magic on me. You're going to say she just broke her arm. So the same thing, mental health illnesses are also another form of illness. It just affects a different part of your body. It's just as real, and it's actually worse because the brain is one of the most important parts of your body. Like it's so much more sensitive, it's so much more fragile, and it's so much harder to overcome mental challenges than it is to overcome physical ones. So instead of us looking at it thinking, oh, like you said, maybe she's pagal, or maybe she's she's got a jinn inside her, or maybe she's this, or maybe she's that, actually stop and look at it from a medical perspective. Even in the Quran, it says that we need to go to the people of knowledge, and we need to look for the people of knowledge. And the people of knowledge are people like your doctors and your therapists and psychologists, and the people that have studied this like properly. Like and when you go to these people, they can teach you, they can help you. Like the therapists are there for support, because when you, like, we all experience hardship in our life, like that's guaranteed. No matter what happens in life, the one thing that is guaranteed is balance. You're going to experience good things and you're going to experience bad things, and sometimes when the bad things happen, they leave wounds, and it's our job to work on those wounds and to heal those wounds for ourselves and for the people around us. And luckily for myself, I developed this mindset early on where I just didn't care about the opinions of other people. So I have this whole, like, obviously coming from the background I come from, it wasn't received very well, because even now, like, I literally put my hands up and I say, I don't care what people think about me. Like, you can say whatever you want, you can think how you want, even if it comes from a cultural perspective, but I don't care, because I know that anything that I do is not going to be detrimental to myself or to anybody around me, and I'm not doing anything wrong. But because of the cultural stigmas that we have, not everybody, can align with that, so to speak. So for me,
Well,
when
don't
I was,
worry. Sorry, I cut you there. I said, don't worry, you have somebody here who's known as the cultural misfit or rebel, if you like, anyway. So yeah,
I
we're both
resonate with that. I'm also the cultural misfit in my family, so that's fine.
so carry on,
So
Halima.
it's
Yeah, I'm loving
fine.
it. Mm.
So for me, when it came to, focusing on my own health and focusing on getting better, I literally took that approach where I just didn't care about the opinions of anybody else. And obviously, where it came to, like, my family, there were a lot of reservations, because I'm very vocal about the things that I talk about, and I'm very open. And obviously, from an Asian family perspective, they can see it in the sense of, oh, like, what are other people going to say, how are they going to look at our family, how are they going to look at you or me, and things like that. And I just said, you know what, like, these people are not paying our bills, these people are not responsible for us going to heaven, so why are we caring so much about what these people think? Just because they think something, it doesn't make it true. And we need to stop being so conscious of other people's opinions, because it really does affect us badly when we do that. Like, I've seen it, like, from people that are close to me. When you care too much about what people think, it really, really limits your life, and it limits on, like, everything around you. So for me, like, I stopped caring about what people think, and I just said, you know what, whatever is going to help me get better, that is what I'm going to do. And somebody told me that the opposite of depression is expression, and that the reason why people get depressed is because they hold things inside them. So I literally took it exactly how he said it, and I said, fine, I'm going to start expressing myself. So I started to talk, and I started to write, and I started to, like, really express myself as much as I could. And obviously, like I said, it wasn't received very well at first, because the things that I spoke about were very, very intense, they were very personal, and they
Yeah.
could have easily been looked at in a certain way. Maybe my family could have misinterpreted that I was maybe trying to make them look bad, which obviously wasn't the case, because alhamdulillah, I have a great relationship with my family, and I know that regardless of any issues that I've had in my past, like, they've always loved me. It's just like the lack of education that our culture has that stopped them from being able to give me the support that I needed. But that's the same with most families. There's always one person that comes in and breaks the cultural barriers, or the generational curses, as they call them, where we have certain beliefs that are passed down from generation to generation. Someone has to come in and change it. And I looked at myself as being that person that was just going to speak and make everybody feel uncomfortable, and to the point where, they start to see a different side of it, the side that I can see. And alhamdulillah, like, coming forward now to the time that we're in, like, different people in my family now have different outlooks where it comes to certain things. So certain things that I say or things that I do for my work that maybe they might necessarily not have approved of a few years ago, now they, alhamdulillah, can see why I'm doing it, and they don't look at it in the same way that they do before. And I came out with an ebook earlier on this year, about how to gain control of your mental health. My mum was, like, my biggest supporter. She was promoting it to, like, everybody, like, and it was amazing, and it felt so good. And I think that 2 years ago, like, I don't think she would have done that. But now, because of her understanding, and because her, like, she's more educated in mental health and she's more aware of these things, she understood the benefit of the work that I'm doing and she understood why I'm doing it, you know. And that's the same thing with everyone. I feel like someone's got to be that person, and it is hard, like it's not easy to take that role on. You have to be prepared for people to say things to you, and you maybe say things that will hurt your feelings, but it's that resilience to it, you know. I just had to keep reminding myself every day that I'm doing this for a bigger reason. I'm doing this for my health. I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this so that one day when I do get married again and I do have children, that they will be able to be in a much healthier environment, and they won't have to suffer with the things that I suffered from or that other people in my family have suffered from, because we'll be able to create this whole new environment that's full of love and compassion, understanding, open-mindedness, you know, that you can be a Muslim and have struggles with your mental health. You can miss your salah because your energy is fluctuating, and it doesn't make you a bad Muslim. You're not possessed, you're human. Like, these things happen to everyone. Like, we're not an exception just because we're Muslim. Like, we will still go through these things.
Absolutely. I hear you, Halima. I can 100% resonate with each and every word that you've said there. Subhanallah. And it just seems like it's me on the other side echoing the words, that I've been repeatedly saying time and time again. Subhanallah. But it's very interesting to see that, two perspectives there, Halima, that number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly said that I'm not going to test you more than what you can take, right? So every
Mm-hmm.
time that we get tried and tested, we should be positively looking forward to the fact that this too shall pass and nothing lasts forever. And Allah subhanahu wa
Yeah.
ta'ala has already promised us. So might as well, not unnecessarily get suppressed or oppressed, but look at alternative possible choices whereby the
Mm-hmm.
options that we choose consciously serve us rather than proving to be detrimental not only for our own physical and mental and emotional health, but that of our family unit as well. So that's one thing
Yeah.
sufficient for a Muslim to hang in there and be positive about it, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly said you don't need to be oppressed, really. In fact,
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong, it says somewhere that the punishment of a person who oppresses another one and somebody who consciously keeps on getting oppressed is really the same. And I understand why, because you see, specifically if it's a woman, if you constantly, consciously, keep getting oppressed, then that means it's not one person being oppressed. You're oppressing the whole generation and perhaps generation upon generation. So that's like the ummah getting crumbled into pieces. So I understand, why this statement is there in the grand scheme of things. And the other thing is this, that, as you mentioned very rightly, that somebody needs to pay the price. Somebody needs to make that sacrifice. So the way I look at this entire process of cleansing ourselves through these trials and tests is, take an example of a diamond, how it has to basically, get churned and polished and cut through a specific process for it to then become smooth and for it to really shine bright. So it's the same example for people like ourselves, that we have a special journey, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us on that journey to learn something, not to be miserable and not to be in a victim mode for the rest of our life, but to learn something and then be able to benefit others from the learnings that we've taken from our own experiences. And hence the reason we are where we are. Until and unless we don't go through a very, what would I say, emotionally draining experience, we wouldn't be able to appreciate life in a better way, if you like. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we're the products of our system, and Alhamdulillah, there's khair in everything. We're hale, we're hearty, we are here sharing our life stories. It's beautiful to be able to impart the learning to all those who are watching us right now. And I'm sure this is a story of literally maybe every other household, and people will definitely be able to resonate with these things, this information that you've shared, the importance of healthy parenthood, and then also the emphasis of, even if parents are going through an abusive relationship amongst each other, there's a time and place for everything. They should be mindful of the fact that if there are children around them, then we shouldn't be talking out loud. They shouldn't be discussing their personal issues. If anything, they should wait for the right time to come, and then perhaps behind locked doors in their own bedroom, they should communicate to each other and talk things through. Now, in
Yeah.
today's day and time, as I always tell, when couples approach me, individuals approach me that we're going through XYZ issues in their marital relationships, the first thing I ask them is, what is your communication like? And that's it, they melt down, because communication is so important. It's literally like the gap between yourself and your relationship. That's how vital communication is. So that
Hmm.
communication needs to be two-way. People don't understand that. Couples don't understand that. They think as though communication is one way. They try to interact with the other person with a predefined outcome in their mind, that this is what I want from this communication or interaction, if you like. I wouldn't even call it communication, because it's one way, clearly, with a predefined outcome. You're going to the other person to interact with them and make yourself heard and make yourself known to the other person that this is what you want. It's either my way or highway. So if it comes to that point, parents need to realize that the impact of their communication is having on the children. सो नाज़रीन, ये बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट मैसेज है जो कि हलीमा ने आपके सबके साथ यहाँ पर शेयर किया, कि अगर आपके निजी मामलात घर में जो है वो आपस में खराब हैं वक्तन फवक्तन, और ये भी एट टाइम्स हेल्थी होता है, एज लॉन्ग एज कि आप सोचें कि व्हाट नीड्स टू बी चेंज्ड एंड यू शुड सीक हेल्प. आप जाइए, काउंसलर्स हैं, थेरेपिस्ट हैं, रिलेशनशिप कोचेस हैं, पीपल लाइक माई सेल्फ who are trained and qualified out, to help you people to serve the community out there. आप जाइए, उनसे राब्ता करें और उनसे डिस्कस करें कि आपकी लाइफ में इस वक्त आप किस स्टेज पे हैं, आपकी जिंदगियों के क्या मसले मसाइल हैं, किस तरह से आपका टिपिकल डे गुजरता है, आपकी एक्सपेक्टेशंस अपने हस्बैंड या अपनी वाइफ के साथ क्या हैं, क्या आपने उन एक्सपेक्टेशंस को क्लियरली उनसे डिस्कस किया था शादी से पहले, नहीं किया था, और अगर नहीं किया था तो अब गोइंग फॉरवर्ड अगर आप उनके शूज में अपने पैर डाल के देखेंगे तो आप उनको क्या एडवाइस करेंगे, एंड वाइस वर्सा. तो ये एक गेम की तरह कपल्स को आपस में ऑन अ रेगुलर बेसिस प्ले वैसे ही करना चाहिए, टू बी एबल टू लुक एट देयर वर्ल्ड थ्रू देयर लेंस एंड बी कंपैशनेट इनफ टू अंडरस्टैंड वेयर दे आर कमिंग फ्रॉम. तो सबसे पहली बात तो ये कम्युनिकेशन की, कि यू शुडंट, कम्युनिकेशन इज ऑलवेज टू वे, एंड you shouldn't get in a communication with a predefined outcome. Always go to the other person with an intention and a compassion in your heart to be able to go and be able to understand, their own inner world and the way they look at the world through their lens. Only then will you be able to understand where they're coming from. And then you'd be in a better position to either make an opinion or judge whether what you wanted and the way the other person perceived the information and acted or reacted was correct or not. तो ये तो communication की बात होगी. तो इसके अलावा दूसरी बात हमने इस वक्त ये डिस्कस की है कि अगर आपकी कम्युनिकेशन में गैप है या आपके रिलेशनशिप्स में कुछ तनाज़ा हैं, तो प्लीज बंद दरवाजे के पीछे उस हवाले से आपस में डिस्कशन करें, या फिर जाके जो है वो आप हेल्प सीख करें, मगर बच्चों के सामने खुदारा कभी भी लड़ाई झगड़ा ऊंची आवाज में एक दूसरे के साथ न बात करें, क्योंकि उसका असर उन बच्चों के कच्चे जहनों के ऊपर बहुत ही मुज़र गुजरता है. आपके सामने हलीमा स्पीक्स की स्टोरी मौजूद है. हलीमा मिस्कीन ने बहुत सारी ज्यादतियों का सामना करते हुए आज वो अपने पैरों पे खड़ी और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह कंप्लीटली हील्ड है, और अब अपनी जिंदगी को एक साबित कदमी के साथ एक मिसाल बनाते हुए आगे चल रही हैं उन लोगों की मदद के लिए जो कि सिमिलर सिचुएशन में इस वक्त मौजूद हैं. They don't know where to go and how to basically heal themselves. So alhamdulillah, thank you so much Halima for bringing that up. Seems like we've been talking to each other for ages and you've pretty much covered everything. I'm like, what else do I need to discuss? So yeah, subhanallah. Yeah, Halima, you were talking about that ebook, and then you also have a self-help plan. Would you like to share what that self-help plan is all about. How can people use that to help themselves, or to explore, what self-healing means, or what healing means, so then so that they become a little bit more aware about the healing process, and also feel a bit comfortable to reach out to people if they have to, because you know how it is at this point in time. People shudder, they don't even want to talk about it, mental health, let alone seeking help. So if you can kindly
Yeah.
elaborate a bit more.
Of course, of course. So obviously the name that I go by, whereas my work is concerned, is Halima Speaks. So that's the easiest way to find me, whether it be like online, my website, halimaspeaks.com, Instagram, halima.speaks, LinkedIn, Halima Speaks. So if you go onto any of those platforms, you'll be able to find my ebook. The ebook is called 12 Steps to Gaining Control of Your Mental Health. So it's a very basic, it's a free ebook. You literally just type in your email address and you can download it. And it goes through 12 basic steps on things that you can do on a day-to-day basis that will enable you to take more control of your mental health, and it will enable you to have a better structure and a better routine. So I actually started to get a lot of messages from people that wanted to work with me, and I wasn't actually going to start doing direct one-to-one coaching till next year. But because of the demand, I actually decided that I'm going to start doing it a lot sooner. So I've created a plan that I'm launching very soon, which is like a 6-week program where people who are experiencing mental health issues as a result of things that they do on a day-to-day basis, we go through all of those things, and we restructure their whole lives on a daily basis, and implement new routines, new things, new habits into their life. And we trial and test a few different things to see what works. We track your mental health, we track your energy levels and everything, and it still needs a little bit of refining, but I will be launching it very, very soon, inshallah. And soon I will be again going into the direct coaching where we work on more intense work, because my vision and my goal is to help support people when it comes to their mental health. It's to facilitate mental health recovery. Anyone that's going through problems, no matter how minor or major it may look like, it's to sit down with you and to listen to your story, to understand why you are experiencing the things that you're experiencing, and then create a tailored plan for you to then move forward with your mental health, because no one's story is the same. So nobody's feelings and nobody's illnesses are the same either. It always needs to be tailored. So I don't have a template, because everybody is different and we have to work off of that. And again, like we talked about, it's through, your pain that you find your purpose. And because I had such a complexity of different issues, it's enabled me to understand complex issues as well, because of the work that I had to do on myself. So there's a lot of different types of people and different types of issues that I can now work with. And I'm also, again, studying on the things that I haven't experienced to give me that better understanding. So if there is anyone that obviously needs that support, that's what I'm here for. That's what, other people are also here for in this industry. And as a goal in general, I want to remove those cultural stigmas. I want to work really hard towards that, because I'm very passionate about the stigma that is currently attached on mental health in general, let alone within our communities, because our community looks at things a little bit differently. So I've spoken to a lot of communities, but this is the second time that I've spoken to specifically just a Muslim community, and it's something again that I'm very passionate about, because I understand that there are so many Muslims that are suffering in silence because of the stigmas that we have, because of the taboo topics that we're not allowed to speak about, and people are suffering greatly because of the fear of breaking these taboos and going against the cultural norm because of what they think might happen. So I want to be one of the people, inshallah, that breaks these stigmas, that breaks these cultural barriers, and creates a brand new culture in the one that we're living in right now. And it's not easy. It's going to take a lot of work, but I'm very committed to doing it. There's a lot more to come from myself when it comes to the work. My business is still in very, very early days. So there's a lot more that I'm creating. There's a lot that I'm working on at the moment. And inshallah, within the next year, there will be a lot more things in place when it comes to actually facilitating and directly supporting other people.
Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts immense barakah in your intention first and foremost, and then in your efforts, so that you're able to reach out so many people out there who are in similar situations and are scared of seeking help. I mean, when it comes to not being able to seek help and breaking barriers, I think it's got nothing to do with deen and being a Muslim. It's got more to do with culture. These are the cultural limitations and the cultural barriers, that stop people from growing and basically just scare them away, from taking a leap of faith and taking, or try to expand your comfort zone, if you like. Because it's one of those things I'm thinking that, psychologically people feel safe and secure being in situations that they're familiar with. And the minute that they find out that one of their children are a bit of an adventurous one and want to explore life and want to expand their comfort zone, that's when they start getting the adrenaline rush in their body, and they start feeling the element of fear kicking in, which again they need to educate themselves and understand that that element of fear is a protective mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in us, and all that it's telling you is that, okay, this is something that you're not familiar with, but it's not telling you that it's dangerous. It's just telling you this is something you're not familiar
Yeah,
with. You haven't known
yeah,
this before. So you might as well want to explore and then jump to the conclusion whether it worked in your favor or it didn't. And that's where the massive
exactly.
growth lies, you see. So, we as parents need to understand that there's a whole world out there beyond our limiting beliefs, which are basically attached to cultural norms and limitations, taboos like, or stigmas like being a divorcee, being somebody suffering from mental health, or and not having
Such a
been married for
they get looked down upon as well. Women that are, in their 30s, 40s that aren't married, that are maybe,
yeah,
too ambitious and things like that. There's a lot,
absolutely.
where there's a lot of things you
Jumbo
can talk
Mumbo,
about.
all
Yeah.
sorts of jumbo Mumbo, yeah. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands and knows our intentions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in our intentions, that we're able to highlight these topics more often and create awareness and be able to, bring about that change that we would like to be and see in our younger generations. So just before, we conclude our session for today, Halima, I'm curious to know, um, why did you decide, or what was the tipping point when you thought, right, I do not want nobody else to help me. This is my journey. I'm going to take the ownership and I'm going to, change the discourse of my life. And you started seeking self-help and all of that. And this started, I remember when you were in the hospital and you spoke to me saying that things weren't going your way and you weren't getting proper treatment. So how were you able to then decide? Because you weren't a practitioner. You were the victim at that point in time. You didn't know what you were going through. So how could you decipher that the therapy, that the treatment that the therapist or practitioners or professionals are making you go through is not for you, it's not effective enough, it's not serving you, because you're going there with the faith, with the mindset that you're in safe hands. So what made you decipher that, it's not working for you and that you need to take control of your life in your hands?
So one thing that I tell everybody is that we have everything that we need inside of us. It's like you said, Allah never gives us a challenge or a test, never burdens us with something that's more than we can handle. So there is always the power within us to overcome these things. We just have to be able to reach into it in a healthy manner. And I was in the mental health unit, and one pattern that had been very common in my life is that anytime something bad used to happen, I used to avoid dealing with it. So I always used to run away from the problem instead of actually dealing with it at face value. So I'd either move away somewhere, or I would start focusing on something, or I would just, get an extra job, or just keep myself busy all the time. So I never had to think about any of the bad things that were going on. When I was in the mental health unit, I couldn't do that anymore. I was literally in this room and I had to sit there and I had to be alone with my own thoughts. And it was so uncomfortable. But as we say, you know, when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, that's when growth happens. That's when things come up to surface. And the first 3 days were very, very intense. You know, I was crying a lot, my emotions were everywhere. But after the third day, I actually calmed down, and all of these thoughts that were coming up to the surface started to wake me up. I started to realize, because that's where my brain was going. So I started to realize all the things that I was focusing on, like subconsciously, all the negative things that I was always thinking about. And obviously, I didn't have all the solutions then. But the one thing that I realized was that the reason why my life had got to the point that it did is all because of me. It wasn't to do with my family. It wasn't to do with my friends. It wasn't to do with anybody else in my life. It was all me. It was the relationship that I had with myself. It was the expectations I had set for my life and the little self-worth that I had, which then enabled for me to be treated the way I did because I didn't have boundaries set in place. You know, everything was just about me. And when I acknowledged that, what I then did was I took the power away from everybody else that I had been blaming all my life to then be responsible for me getting better. Because when you blame everybody else, you're indirectly giving them the power to fix your problems and you take the power away from yourself. So I gave myself back my power and I acknowledged that. But then when I came out of hospital, I still, you know, had a care plan from the doctors and I had people coming to see me, but they weren't trained properly to dealing with somebody that had complex issues such as myself. So instead of making me better and helping me move forward, I was actually getting worse. I started self-harming again straight after I came out of hospital, like during the night when everybody was asleep. And when that happened, I realized that if I keep going this way and I keep just doing whatever they're telling me to do, I'm not going to get better. They don't understand me like I understand myself. And it's very important to differentiate the difference between isolating yourself in a healthy way and isolating yourself in an unhealthy way. Never Never isolate yourself when you're in a very dark place, when your mental health is declining, you know, when you don't know how to manage your emotions, when you're not ready to get better. But I was in a very different place by then. I wanted to get better. I was fed up of living the way that I was living, and I wanted to get better and I wanted to heal and move forward. So that's when I decided that if I'm going to get better, it's all going to come from me. Nobody else can do it for me. So that's when I, you know, packed my bags. That's when I moved, and I like went on my own and I isolated myself. And it was very, very intense because the first step of doing that was to understand myself, because you know, how often do we spend time alone by ourselves, creating and strengthening a relationship with ourselves? We live for everybody around us. You know, you live for your parents, you live for your children, you live for your siblings, your friends, like your spouse. You just live for everybody else, but you don't do it for yourself. So I had to take that time to be on my own, to spend time with myself, to take myself out and understand who I am, like right from the core. And when I started to understand more about myself, it became so much easier to recover and heal from all of these issues because of the strength that I had built, because of the new level of self-love that I had created. I was able to set new boundaries. And automatically, when you start doing this, your energy changes. You know, humans are energetic beings. We put out energy. And when you change from inside, the energy that you put out is different. So the people in your life, if they're not good for you, they will organically just leave your life. The people that are good for you will stay. When you set your new boundaries in place, the people that are in your life are either going to accept them or they're not. If they accept them, then great, keep them there. They will start treating you better. They will understand you better. And if they don't, goodbye. Like that's what's best for you, you know? And
Yeah.
it was that whole process. That was obviously, it was so much longer and so much more intense and complicated, but that was the basis and that was the beginning of me actually taking that stand to doing it on my own. And eventually, when I came out of the first, you know, part of the intense recovery where I was on my own, that's when I started to source out support as well. So it's very important to highlight that at some point during my recovery, I did start going to events, like self-help events. I started going to some spiritual events where people talk about the psychology and that aspect, and I started to learn different healthy coping mechanisms, for me to be able to channel my emotions in a healthier way. And that supported me within my own
Alhamdulillah.
recovery, is learning all these things from people that knew better than I did, you know?
Yeah.
So I eventually put that all
Excellent.
together, alhamdulillah, and here I am
Yeah.
now.
Alhamdulillah. So on that note, I would just like to end it by saying, Halima, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to know who you are. Maulana Rumi used to say that one who knows himself knows Allah. So that was an opening for you to be able to connect with the real Halima, get to know the real Halima, get to know who you are, so that you can understand who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So Jazakallah
Yeah.
khair again for coming on board and sharing your story with us. I am sure that lots of people have been inspired by it, and lots of people are definitely going to benefit from the information that you shared. Thank you so much, Halima, for joining us today. जी नाजरीन, उम्मीद करती हूँ कि आप सबको बेतहाशा फायदा हुआ होगा इस इंफॉर्मेशन से जो हम सब ने आपके साथ मिलकर आज शेयर की है। इंशाल्लाह इसी तरह हर मंडे आपके साथ दोबारा से मुलाकात करते रहेंगे और कोई ना कोई एक ऐसा टॉपिक आपके सामने लेकर आते रहेंगे जिसके हवाले से जानकारी करके आपको अपनी जिंदगी में उस इंफॉर्मेशन को इस्तेमाल करके आगे बढ़ना, प्रोग्रेस करना, प्रोडक्टिव रहने में मदद इंशाल्लाह मिलती रहेगी। तो तब तक के लिए इजाजत चाहती हूँ। आपकी सहेली, आपकी दोस्त